Oh, hey! This thing is too bright over here, so I guess I'll just do it in the interim or something. So, a couple things. First thing, this is a new camera, which I'm going to lose very soon, so I thought I'd shoot something on it while I still had the opportunity. So, this is that. And a couple of... Oh, wait, no. No, that's fine. So, with this opportunity now, I'd like to talk about a thing that's been bothering me for a while, as usual. What else is new? So, the thing that's been bothering me for a couple days now... Oh, shit. ISO. What the fuck? There we go. The thing that's been bothering me for a while now is philosophy. So recently I took a philosophy course at my university, right? And this is not something I wanted to do, it's just something I had to do to pass and graduate, get a degree and all that. So I took this philosophy course and it's on existentialism, which is something that really we use day-to-day life, I think. We say existential crisis and stuff like that, but we don't really know what we're talking about. So I was like, hey, this sounds interesting. Why don't I take this class? So I did, and it's still happening, so it's not fully done yet. But the thing that they talk about really got me thinking about how we think of philosophy and art, or rather how little we think of philosophy and art, right? There's a great tradition of like artists using philosophy as a jumping off point for what they want to do. And I think that's something that's been lost over the years, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because over the years the barrier for entry to get widespread acclaim through your art has become lower and lower, and that's great, right? It allows people who traditionally wouldn't have made it to make it into the limelight, which is always good. Like, it's always good when people are making money off their art, but it does prevent a few of the more self-reflective periods of an artist's career, which I think are kind of essential if they want to improve to the maximum of their potential, right? So, like, for example, Dan Harmon is someone that I listen to a lot, his podcast, Harmontown, and also just random interviews with him, because he's a guy who lived the dream, right? He came from Milwaukee with his friend to Los Angeles, and he wrote a script. He got it made. I think he started writing TV, and then he wrote a movie, and then now obviously he's most famous for Rick and Morty. Of course, he's probably also most... Holy shit. Are you kidding me? Fuck. So obviously now he's most famous for Rick and Morty, but in the past he was most famous for Community. So anyway, the point is this. He went through a long period, like 2 or 3 years, when no one was giving him anything. Like, no one gave him a chance to get his script made. No one gave him an opportunity to write for their show or anything like that. And what that can do for you, right? What that can do for you when you're just sitting at home thinking you're a failure is self-reflection. Self-reflection. When somebody is not appreciating what you're putting forth, or they're not accepting it and considering it to be of value, it really makes you reevaluate what you consider to be valuable, what you consider to be good about your own art, and reassess what exactly you're doing with your life, right? And those times are not easy, let me tell you, right? It can be one of the worst times of your life, probably, and probably will be the worst time of your life, because at least later on you'll have some recognition of some form or other. So when you're just starting out and you're not getting recognized at all, that's the time when you feel the worst about yourself. But that's not something to be avoided, right? That's something to be embraced, because there's no other way you can deal with it. The only way you can deal with it is by embracing it and harnessing it to what it can actually be used for, which is to make yourself better. And you can say that you can get better too when you're recognized and when you're considered to be a successful artist, but realistically, that's not what happens. Like, when a band makes their first good album and it's good, and then they move on and they start touring all over the world, their second album is usually never as good, right? We consider it a rarity when a band's second album is just as good as their first, and rarely is it better, if ever. So when you're in that period of struggle, that's the time when you can most improve, when you have that fire under you to get better at your craft. Which I think is symbolized in Dark Knight Rises, when they have this kid jump across a chasm. So the kid of indeterminate gender jumps across this chasm, and the way that the kid makes it is by not having a rope. by not having that support, right? And by not having that support, it gives the kid that extra edge to make it across the chasm, which is something I think we need to interpret in our life too. Like if you're trying to do YouTube full time, you kind of already know what that edge is like. But that edge is a different kind of edge because that's like a sustenance edge. You're not making any money. So the immediate impetus is for you to make videos that get more views because that's how you make more money. But once you get those views, it's way too hard to be complacent. I didn't want to pull out names, but I'm going to pull out names. So here we go. So the philosopher I was initially thinking about was Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard. He talks about how like there should be an anxiety at the back of your mind at all times because of the nothingness of existence, and that nothingness of existence is not a bad thing, that it's actually a motivating factor, because once you realize that there's nothing of meaning, that means you can attribute meaning to whatever it is you want to do. But if you attribute meaning to something that really doesn't deserve your time, you're not attributing meaning to anything, and you're just doing what everyone else around you is doing. And in this case of YouTube, that will be just chasing views. That's called acting in bad faith, which is a Sartre thing, not a Kierkegaard thing. But I think the point gets across. You're not supposed to be doing that, right? You're supposed to be bettering yourself. And this is something also I thought about with their definition of the self, where they define the self as like this inwardly facing thing that like incorporates things that exist in itself into itself again and again. And that's like a continuing process, and that it never ends because the self is not a static thing. And it got me thinking, like, why don't we do that? Like, we're so eager. Like me, for example, I've made 2 videos, now 3, and I don't think I've transcended what I was trying to do in the first place, which I consider to be a personal failure that I haven't done that already. Like, maybe so. It just like it's so discouraging to like do stuff and then not see it go anywhere. Like, not even view wise, because I care about that less than I probably should, and I care about that less than the artistic satisfaction in itself. And also, I was reading one of his passages from this textbook we have, and he mentions in it like an error. He sees an error in his work, and then that error is like that. He imagines the error like becoming self-aware, and then like him like the error calling out to him, and then him not fixing it, because fixing the error would mean like to declare yourself infallible, and in the final product there wouldn't be any error. So it makes it look like the person who wrote it is perfect, whereas actually we all know we're not. And that really made me think about YouTube, because I think it's happened to all of us at some point where we see a mistake in a video and we think about, oh, should we correct that, or do we just put a little thing in that makes it self-aware, that makes it like, oh, hey, look, I said this word 3 times in a sentence or something like that. Like, is that the way to go? Do we just show we're fallible, right? Because I think that's more useful than to just fix the mistake and make it a flat plane. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And I know I've said all this like a million times before, but realistically, complacency is like the enemy of humanity. And it was just encouraging to see it from a new source, like from a source that the existentialists also think the same thing, that if we ignore the terrifying aspects of our reality and we don't engage with them completely, then we're basically dooming ourselves to like a life where we're not completely engaged at all. So this is a concept of like Albert Camus. So as you can see, I've really taken to this philosophy course, and Albert Camus really took to this, right? He talked about the only meaningful philosophical question is whether or not we should commit suicide, which to me is like super meaningful, because think about what that means for a second. If you decide that you're not going to kill yourself, which the majority of us do every single day, the vast majority of us decide not to kill ourselves every single day. So what does that mean? You've accepted that life comes with its own challenges and that you have to deal with them in any way that you can, because the underlying facts of existence are not going to change, right? You're born and you're going to die someday. Everyone's going to die. And there's no grand meaning to the universe. It's just all empty. So what? That doesn't mean anything grand. That's just how it is. It doesn't really mean anything more than that. And I think having a prescribed meaning in the first place would be kind of limiting if you think about it. Like, for example, this is the example I gave my sister when I was talking to her yesterday about this. It's like, what if the ultimate meaning in life was to make the best Idaho potatoes? Now, that might sound like a demeaning example, but just think about that. The actual meaning of the universe could be as simple as that, or it could be like keeping the polar ice caps from melting or something like specific. And that means no matter what you're interested in, no matter what you wanted to do with your life, that would be what you would have to contribute to. There would be no question of you doing anything else, because there's no point. There's a grand meaning to everything. That means if you're doing something other than that, you're actively wasting your time. But what if there is no meaning? Like in our universe, there's no meaning to anything. That means you can do whatever the fuck you want, right? Because it doesn't matter what you do, because all of it is the same level of meaninglessness. Even if you're a lawyer, or even if you're a physicist or a mathematician or whatever it is, whatever you do has the same amount of meaning, which is zero, right? It only has as much meaning as it has to you. So if you really want to be a potato farmer, then go ahead and do it, because that's the thing that you want to do with your life, and that's the most meaningful thing to you, right? It doesn't matter what anyone else tells you to do, because that's what you want to do, so that's the most meaningful thing. That's the only thing you should do. On the other hand, if you're forced to do something other than your meaningful life, that has the equal level of meaninglessness, except that you're unhappy, right? Because you're not doing the thing that you wanted to do in the first place. So there's a level of like, that's what he calls philosophical suicide, which is just accepting what life throws at you and not trying to go out of your way and resist it. And resistance is like a really big theme of all these existentialist writers. It's like resisting the forces that try to push you in the direction of the universal, like in the direction that everyone else is going in. And I think that's something also that YouTube people and creatives in general really identify with, because we always feel like it's a resistance to do what we want to do. Like, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a YouTube video maker, if you want to be a filmmaker, whatever it is, you're like going against the norm of society. So you always feel that you're like, it's a defiant act to want to do that in the first place. Whereas with this philosophy, armed with this philosophy, you can see that really it's not it's a defiant act, but really it's like the only choice that you have. That's the only really thing that you can justify doing with your life, because that's the most meaningful thing to you. I'm just blabbering now. This is Dreamtime 4.1, by the way, where I justify everything I said in the past one with more like concrete fact than just saying do whatever you want to do. This is like a philosophical justification of the previous video, I guess. And another important part of the existentialist writings is subjectivism, but subjectivism in a way that's centered around the individual, right? And that's always been the way that subjectivism is. But we've kind of fallen into a social subjectivism, which I don't think is all that productive. I think individual subjectivism is a lot more useful and a lot more interesting, because when you take subjectivism as a society, it's basically everyone doubting everything about everything, and it doesn't really come up with anything useful or interesting. But if a single person explains to me their worldview through their lens, I find that to be the most interesting thing. Right, so today I saw this video about how this dude likes jazz. He wrote a video essay about how he likes jazz, and it got me thinking about, first of all, great video, you should watch it, I'll probably put it in the description. It got me thinking about like how insightful that video is into that guy's life. Like, I don't know anything about him, but when I saw that video, it made me think of like my own life more than his life. So it's like him providing insights into his life gave me insight into my life, which is something I think we all know instinctively, but that we kind of like go out of our way to avoid. And at the end of the video, he mentions that he said, "I'm sorry, this video is just my opinion piece." And I was like, wait, why are you sorry that it's your opinion? You know, like, your opinion is the most interesting thing that you have to say, because any objective thing that you can say is a like already explained concept. Like, and this is another thing which the existentialists talk about, which is the finite versus the infinite, and how human beings are always going between the two, and language is the realm of the finite. And when you try to define something by putting it in terms of language, you're limiting it to something that's identifiable in words. And we can try to use words to like describe things that are more than just the sum of their parts, right? We can try to do that, but realistically, an idea is infinite. Like when you get this idea, when it's in your head, it's not limited by any physical aspects or any like even language. Like if you describe like this coffee table is this, it has all these facts about this coffee table, but the idea of a coffee table in your head is like completely different than the actual physical object that's in the world right now. When you look at this coffee table, you know it's a coffee table, but this particular coffee table is different than every single one. And by like this is a quantum mechanics phrase, so stick with me for a second. By collapsing the coffee table the wave function, by collapsing the coffee table wave function to this table, you're limiting it from the infinite possibilities it had before you saw it. Like, so when you think of coffee table in your head, it's infinite, right? And this guy's jazz video, when I was watching it, he was talking about the concept of jazz and like his relationship with his father and like his teenage years, and like how jazz became like more of a concept to him. Like jazz was that improvisational spirit that he's adopted into his life. And that's, while it's still defined in language, it inspires ideas in your head that are more than that. Like the video is called I Love Jazz, but what he's talking about is about a lot more than a particular piece of music or a collection of a few pieces of music. It's the concept of like going from step to step in your life, not knowing what's going to come next, like improvising your way through it. And that's something I think a lot of us can relate to, a lot of us YouTube people can relate to. It's like you don't know what's coming next. You're kind of just flying by the seat of your pants because you're hoping that whatever comes next is good for you, but you don't know exactly if it will be or not. So you're just hoping that it is. And that's kind of what this video inspired in me. For me, that's what it inspired in me. But for someone else, it could be something completely different. It could just be like about music, and they're like, oh, I don't like jazz. And they like their life to be all planned out, and like maybe they like classical music or something. They could use that as a metaphor for what they like about life that they want to live, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Like the whole point is, an idea is like, it's like an Inception quote. An idea is a virus in your mind. But that's why ideas are so difficult. One, they can be initially difficult to understand, and this is something that I think a lot of psychologists went into in the 20th century, is trying to figure out. It's been recording for 4 minutes, dude. My camera cut off again, this overheating piece of shit. So what I was saying is, okay, truck, calm the fuck down. What I was saying is, an idea is like a virus. And really, every school of philosophy is like nothing more than an idea. It's just an idea at the center of it that makes you reassess what you were thinking about your life up to that point. So realistically, you don't have to know that much about all the philosophers and all what they said and everything else. There's really only one thing you need to know about existentialism, which is fuck me. There's only really one thing you need to know about existentialism, which is existence precedes essence. That means something exists and then it defines itself. That's all you need to know about that. Okay, so back to ideas. So remember when I said that an idea from a philosophy is just a way that you have to reassess your life after you learn that idea? That's what everyone is missing in any creative endeavor today, right? I don't know that much about like playwriting and stuff. That's something I'm only like recently delving into, but like books, TV, movies, anime especially, everything. Video games also. Everyone is just looking to cash in on the trend. They're just trying to make money. They're just trying to make money. They're just trying to get views, right? It's the same thing. They're just trying to become more mainstream and get more successful. But they haven't arrived at that idea yet, which is going to change the way you look at your life, right? Which I think was not maybe the primary focus of a lot of games in the past, but I think was a side effect of just making really great art in games in the past. And I don't think that's the main aspect of what people are trying to do today, especially in the video game and anime industry, which is two things that I do participate in a lot, and I'm trying to make it more mainstream so that people can understand what I'm talking about. It's like, if you look, I was scrolling down my anime list today to see all the different 2018 summer anime that are coming out, and all of them are complete derivative garbage. All of them. The vast majority of them are not trying to do anything new. They're just trying to make money so that their studio can stay alive, which is a problem of all the studios splitting up into smaller and smaller studios, and now there are barely enough people to make one show at a time, and they can't afford to make a show that flops. They cannot do that, because if they do, all of them will be out of a job, and they have to go back to their old job, which, well, in a weird way, like an Oogway twist, they end up doing what they didn't want to do with their old job. They left their old job because they wanted to do more creative stuff, and now the new studio head is telling them, hey, make this shitty isekai show, and then 3 years from now we can afford to make our own show, right? At the same time with video games, there are a lot of video game studios, and there are a lot of big conglomerates that own the developers, the publishers who own the developers, and then they just assign them to franchise after franchise, and then they bring their little special sauce to that franchise to make it a little bit different from what happened last time. And the same with movies. Like, all these video games and movies are too big to fail. They have to be successful. They have to make way more money than any movie should make at one time, because there was that much money put into them to be made. Like, they're spending $100-200 million on a movie. You can't make a niche little indie movie that's shot on an iPhone, right? You can't do that. So it doesn't really encourage creativity. It encourages consumption more and more. Like, they just want you to see that movie in your Netflix queue and know that you have to press play, and if you do, you get a safe, rewarding experience. You won't be challenged. You won't face any ideas that force you to reassess your existence, like I've been talking about for the past way too fucking long now. So there's that. That's all I wanted to say. That was my way of justifying all the shit that I said in the previous video. Dreamtime 4.1 probably will not have this camera after today. So Dreamtime 5 will be shot on a completely different camera. So thank you for watching, and bye.